As Ra would say, welcome to the channel of tribal spirituality, because the 4037 is not by its nature mystical. He says, please get that. It requires some kind of event, and that event doesn't have to be mystical. It can be a tragedy. It can be all kinds of things. Something that happens in the life that suddenly opens up this possibility for turning one's back on tradition. So here in the 4037, it's 3740, it's the equivalent of our 1156 in that there's the seeking, searching. And here we also too have finding. The finding of the mystical truth on this way to awakening is that it's not about the search for the touch of God, which it initially begins as. What we're doing is not just simply liberation from tradition, but in the search for truth, finding one's own individual nature, eventually down the line. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about this channel of tribal spirituality, which is part of the cross of planning, our current background era from 1615 to 2027. And it's one of those absolutely fascinating channels, so deeply connected, not just to the cycle that we're in, this cycle that's coming to an end, but also one of the foundations of what it is to be human, because it is one of the three essential ingredients in our humanness. Ross says that it's something to remember about these channel definitions that are the direct result of oppositions in the wheel. So a definition, two centers, the opposition in the wheel, polarities across the wheel that are meeting in a channel that are creating what it is for us, archetypally speaking, to be human, because it's the most common definition. So you have this 3420, which is the new era that we're moving into. You have the 3740, which is the old era that's crumbling. All these bargains breaking down. It's not a joke. It's not to be taken lightly. It is quite serious. And yet, it's time to break through. It's time to break free. It's time to have a new individuality. Here's the individuality, the 4323, where those of you who have done this work professionally, you know that these are so common. I mean, most of your charts are going to have some configuration of this, either from Sun, Earth, or nodes, or even more rarely, you might find random planets in there, because just planetary transits will also create these channels. These are the channels where the fundamental humanness, being charismatic and busy in the now, structuring our unique, freaky, individual insights in order to explain what we know, or supporting our tribe, our family, our familiars, our friends, our neighbors. So when it comes to the essential ingredients of what it is to be human, busybody know-it-alls who love to eat. I mean, you could play with all kinds of keynotes. Remember the mouth 37 and the stomach 40. So one of the interesting things that is so fascinating about spiritual experiences, if you think back to Ra's experience, do you remember how he actually had a fast for a very long time where he was just stared at the sun? If you've heard that story. In many mystical experiences, people particularly tend to go on long fasts to clear out the body. And so this is one of the things on that path in the mystical journey, the fast from the food, from bonding in tribe over food, because that's the end of the tribal relational dynamic. Something happens, you turn your back, and you move into individuality rather than going into money, as we have seen. We'll revisit that theme again. It's very important that in this channel of tribal spirituality that we see, it does have its own uniqueness, its own way. That is, this is the only connection that the ego has to the emotional system. It really takes someone's affection, 37, loyalty, 37, or massaging the ego of the 40 in order to get that 40 to love providing for them. 40s work for the love, the affection, the contribution of the other if it's separate. And we're going to talk about a couple of different things here when it comes to the dynamic of whether you have it in a full channel or whether you just have gates on either side. So the way that Ra looks at this is the glorious and the profane when it comes to this tribal spirituality. That is the 37 being the glorious and the 40 being the profane. So this is an underlying need that the search is resolved for finding God. Remember, channel of curiosity, design of a seeker searcher is looking. Is it finding? Not necessarily. Not really. It finds a belief. It stimulates others with its story. But what's true down here in the bridge, this channel of tribal spirituality, it's not in and of itself mystical. Again, this is the tribal equivalent of the channel of curiosity. That is, both are very much about seeking. And this one, the bridge, is very much about finding. Remember, tribe is tactile, it's touch. We find our bonding, our communion over food with our tribe. So because there's a tribal need for the search itself in one way or another to find God. How are we going to find God? Well, we can make the sacrifice and we can imbibe the spirit of God through communion. Isn't that interesting how there are very many religions out there who use sacrifice, take this as, my blood or my bones or whatever it happens to be, that there are these themes of sacrificing that's carried through this stream. The 37th gate of family, brings fear of tradition, having to hold traditional roles. This is the path of worship and the hope of being touched by God. So the deepest theme of the searching, the seeking, wanting the touch of God, in the real power of religions, it's about bonding human beings together through ritual. So you have all of these different ways that we ritualize our mechanism for bonding through food, whether it be the Holy Sacrament on Sundays or, being a whirling dervish or hula dancing, whatever it happens to be. There's this very powerful force as we enter into the quantum of this particular group dynamic, whatever it happens to be as far as its tribal nature, this tribe versus that tribe's, we do this, we don't eat that, whatever it happens to be. So maybe sweat lodges, healing tents, all this prayer circles, intensity, excitement, oftentimes centralized around food, where there are certain beings that are in support of the energetic dynamic between the emotional system or getting people jacked up. We know this term from our emotional wave principle, jacked up in order to find the touch of God. But that God touch, usually when people say God touched, they're God touched. It's an inner thing. So because here in the tribe, you're always praying or looking for the touch of God, it's part of the tradition to be able to pray, to be able to worship, to be able to look and to find. Remember how this channel of community, design of a part seeking a whole, can also be labeled the channel of the bargain. The fair and balanced bargain is generally what we say on this side. The other side, the mirror channel 4426, surrender, design of a transmitter, that's driving the hard bargain. But here it's communal tribal support, where the deals are not just made with each other, but they're made with God. So inherently, this is the channel of bargains. Link bargains to this particular channel. The first bargain is, of course, mother, father, children obey their mother, father, and all of that. We're going to go into that through the line qualities, especially. And 40 or 37, either side, they're both going to pray for the bargain. So you find oftentimes in religion that human beings, archetypally, they will make up stories based upon anthropomorphizing and energetic. So let's say praying to Zeus, or Jupiter, looking for the energy to be able to have luck or fortune or more food in the belly or a success in your capability of going through higher education, all of those things relating to Jupiter. So there are going to be different results of the bargain based upon how one might pray in order that they save the day. And whether it be a puja or, making an altar or donating in the name of whatever saint or savior or God, if you will, both sides of this channel are going to try and pray in order to find God. It's just part of the nature of what it is to be human. Interestingly, humans who are ignorant, we make up stories in order to rationalize what we think of as reality. Because the 37 has this deep need for loyalty and it gives affection in return, the need for prayers to be answered, this is the inner silent prayer, a possibility of expression that is filled with a depth of feeling because this is emotional. An emotional gate that is profoundly in the thrall of needing God to answer its prayers. So you got a 37, go pray, go pray, go pray, and you resonate that way? Well, there you have it. That's where it's coming from. Okay. Now, in the other side, we have the 40th gate of deliverance, which is the path of denial and the pain of being alone. The path of denial, which is, no, obviously, that's the other side of this story here. The path of denial, the 40th gate, can be associated, for example, with Zen, neti, neither this nor that, common phrase over there. There is this fundamental denial of the mechanism of what it is to be in community, because this is one of the three gates of aloneness. It denies, it says no, it shuts the other out, it shuts the other down. But at the same time, the 6th or 40th gate, I was thinking of the 6th line and decapitation. The 40th gate has a disadvantage in that it loves work, it loves earning love. So it loves work that is emotionally rewarding, that's going to earn it the support of the 37. It works for that pleasure, which is one of the deals or bargains that it will ensure that it has access to. The heart center, the stomach organ with the 40. Okay, stomach organ, as in, the filling your own belly or the belly of your bellies of your family. So if it ever does pray, the 40 will pray for pleasure. That's a very different kind of prayer than the 37 has this deep need for prayer to be answered. Please, God, that inner silent prayer that can be filled with this depth of the ratcheting emotional wave of feeling, where the deals are made with God through prayer, as right here, mystical channel of the tribe. So the deliverance path of denial and the pain of being alone. So sad when you see a 40 who is not living out its true nature and is, let's say, they're generative frustrated, they're projected bitter, they're manifested angry at the pain of being alone, rather than exulting in their aloneness. The aloneness doesn't have to be such a terrible thing. It doesn't have to be lonely. It just means being alone. All one is one of the jokes in the spiritual, or play on words, spiritual communities, ALLONE, all one. You remove one of the L's, alone. The dance of worship, this path and the hope of being touched by God, the dance between the two of these people, the glorious 37 and the profane 40, as Ra would call it. That dynamic, that connective field actually has a tension point between the two. So if you start to study the higher realms of human design from the business aspect or the sociological aspect, you start to find that there are these places within, especially this ego circuit, that there are these tension points or these dynamic places where the connection is kind of weak. And this is one of those places right here. Ra says, I'm going to follow through with the process we've been going through because I think it's very, very important that you understand line themes and how through line themes, you can really begin to grasp the depth of these surfaced keynotes. And thanks to Katja, who got really interested, she expanded, as you can see. Normally we have about 60 slides. She went into 102 slides. So today's class is going to be kind of extensive. My apologies if it goes beyond your space for focus, but you'll have the recording to connect up with. And next week, we're going to have a break. Just a reminder. Yeah, we're having a break. So we're going to begin with the family in this 37th gate, a friendship, bringing fear of tradition. You can see that, again, we have 1st through 6th lines to respect the elders, the tradition of the elders or not, to follow the tradition of the elders or not, to behave according to the tradition of the elders or not, to influence the maintaining of the tribal tradition or not, devotion to tribal tradition or not, and the value of tribal tradition or not. As usual, we're going to start at the bottom, and I did not skip over the or not with every single one because Ra wants us to strongly remember that it's an or not. One of the things that may shock a lot of people who don't necessarily study human design deeply is that they only see and express what they think of as the positive side of the coin. And it simply is an amoral system. It's this or that. But where we find that thematic happens to be in very specific places. And thanks to Katja again for going through the line qualities. We're going to highlight. I might not be able to read everything, but we'll see how it feels to flow through this information. If I ever repeat the classes again, you'll always get the current upgrade. Okay. As usual, there's always going to be a very strong difference between the lower trigram and the upper trigram. That's obviously going to be the case wherever it is that we look. So when we look at the lower trigram, 1, 2, and 3, remember it's part of the gate process. So the family process with its fear of tradition, we're looking at the relationship that these have to their elders. Elders, why? Because within tribal values, we honor the father, mother, and therefore the elders in our dynamic, even the ancestors. It's just part of what it is to be tribal. So the relationship of the first line to its elders, second and third, is going to be very different than the 4th, 5th, and 6th. As far as their relational dynamic to the elders. Because when we're looking at the upper trigram being transpersonal, we're looking at not just mother, father, but we're looking at the larger context of these human beings in relationship to the tribe itself, as far as the larger configuration of many families, not just me in relationship to my mother, father, my family, sister, brother, what have you. So the lower trigram looks for an answer to its prayers very differently than upper trigram. Remember, the 37 is going to potentially have the ability to express its awareness. Remember, it's possibility for expression of awareness. So here is the bargain. First line, respect the tradition of the elders or not. Here's why I'm following these traditions. Here's if I get in trouble, I want God to, or goddess, or whatever it is, it happens to be, maybe the gods, if you believe in yourself as God, then you're looking for your higher self, maybe to respect the tradition of whatever that person that happens to be there holding that 37 fear of tradition. In the first line, we're looking at serving the tradition that is there for the reward to be touched by God by respecting. Second line is following. Third line is behaving in alignment or accordance with the traditions of the elders or not. So this is the way that they wait for their prayers to be answered. They'll respect, first line, follow, second line, behave, third line, or not the tradition of the elders. Okay, those are the keynotes there. So if we look at the first line, respect of the tradition of the elders or not, do recall that all keynotes are part of the genetic continuity principle, which says that all 64 hexagrams, all the lines resonate to all the other lines of the same value. So wherever you look, because of genetic continuity, you can take any information from any line and you can bring that to the essence of the profile of somebody's incarnation cross, their life's work, their public role. Remember that, because we're going to look at spiritual profiling when we get to the end of this course. Oh, I quite like that. Spiritual profiling. One of the funnest things I find is the way that Ra created terms and combined words that makes my mind go, wait, what? What's that? Curious and curious. Curiouser and curiouser, the mind being delighted by information and knowledge. Okay, so the first line is respect the tradition of one's parents. He wants you to see the other things that are there. Of course, reminder too. First line is insecure. And the first line, again, has a need. Happily, it definitely rhymes, works with this particular tribal nature of being, needs. It's a stream of need. It's tribal. You're looking at a first line because of its insecurity, seeking to find the solid foundation. They need it. So what we're looking at spiritually here in this context, because of the fear of tradition or having to hold traditional roles, will have the first line respecting the tradition of one's parents or not. It's very primitive here. You can actually have a group of elders that represents the clan's traditions, but at the purest level, this is about the parents because it's very close to one's process, yes? Yeah, insecurity. So if we look at the gate 37, gate of friendship and family, this is the manifestation, macro and microcosmically, of the organic nature of communities. First line is called mother, father. We're learning about in this lifetime here a position of inherent respect that ensures a focus for the development of guidelines. Venus exalts. Harmony is the key to successful maintenance of relationships. It is only through harmony that the beauty and the values of the family can endure. Friendship that is rooted in sensitivity and ensures harmony. There's no polarity here, meaning there's no flip side of the coin. One of the things that's rare in the Rave I Ching. So here, it's about understanding that all first line profiles are caught between honoring thy mother and father or not. And what if those two are at odds with each other? They don't present a unified solidarity or unified front because, what if they're even divorced? Lots of people have had that challenge in the current era where the tribal bargain is breaking down and the institution of husband and wife does not hold up in the same way. Not as many arranged marriages, which actually happened to be quite successful back in their day, relatively speaking, as far as holding the family together, right? So how do you respect the tradition of the elders? As a first line, you respect the tradition of the elders if you get the reward that you need. So the reward that you need, do remember that we're dealing with the emotional system. And that means, the emotional system goes through an up and down wave. Here, it's the ratcheting wave. It's the trigger that cranks up and then has to off gas. Most of this in the emotional system has to do with basic pleasure. Here, we're talking about touch pleasure. Yeah, the drive of the abstract is the sexuality shared, as in the desire trip. The individuality is the pressure for the communion with passion and romance and acoustic connection. But here, basic pleasure, when it comes to need for touch, does that need bring the reward of the pleasure in their life? I have a 37 child. She needs touch. She literally needs touch. As far as she's a 1-3, she needs hugs. I called her my little huggy buggy. I still do when she wants hugs. She just arms out, hug, hug. It's still her thing. She's 17. I love it. It's cute. Okay. So respect the tradition of the elders. It's emotional. It's needy. It's in the wave. Ross says there's a problem here because respecting the traditions of the elders is not something that's fixed. It can't be. It's emotional. It's emotional, it's needy, and it's in the wave. So then what happens is the respect for the elders, it wavers. It doesn't necessarily go away, but it does waver because we're going up and down on the wave. Do we need that touch now or not? Do we want that communion, that connection now or not? What a first line can do, because they're quite investigative, they're constant observers of others, as far as they're very empathic when it comes to others. What they can see at the first line level is that the tradition, its foundation is false. You marry that with a 1-3 profile, then you see that they'll discover those things that do not work. Seeing the tradition that does not bring security, because remember, it's resonating to security or not, insecurity. So it's looking for the solid foundation, investigating whether prayers are really answered or not. Is this God that they speak of truly going to touch me so deeply that I have my need for touch met or not? They will investigate whether their prayers are answered or not. Please let mom put down the bottle so that she doesn't, close herself up in her room and cry because dad's been gone. Please, God, help my mother recover from my daddy leaving us, or whatever it happens to be. These little children that learn how to pray in order that God saves the day. First line, respecting the tradition of the elders or not, these children, people, will investigate in order to discover whether or not the maintenance of the respect for the tradition of the elders will, in fact, ensure a solid foundation. How much respect for the tradition of the elders will actually work? How deep does the rabbit hole go? This first line quality, every single one who is either first line here or first line in the personality or body, they are being caught in the dilemma of whether or not to respect the elders. People like us do things like this, or grandma, mama, daddy said so. Okay, so generally it tends to be, again, the mother-father principle. As we shift into the second line, following the traditions of the elders or not, follow the traditions. You begin to get an insight into the aspect of the second line that keeps it hidden in a way, because this is the hermit quality here in the family. This following the traditions of the elders or not, because we have fear of tradition, this is the point of waiting for the call within one's own private world. So when it comes to your own environment, where you are at home, because you're hermit, either body or mind, your resonance to being a hermit means that you're going to do your own thing in your own time, in your own natural way, And other people may see it. You're lighting your puja candle, or you're praying, to Ganesha or whatever it happens to be. And other people may hear it, but you think that you're doing your own thing and that nobody can see you. You're unaware that you're being seen. Yeah, the second line follows within their own private world. That's what it is to be a hermit. Do your own thing. But everybody can see whether you're really following the traditions or not. You think you're not seen, but you're seen, right? The unseen was the one. The seen is the two. So everybody can see into your little view, your window, and they can see whether or not you truly honor and obey Mother, Father, generally speaking. The second line being called out to follow the traditions of the elders or not. In this 37-2, you have this waiting for a call where you get called out to participate in the tradition, and you could go into your environment and ignore it. The Democrat, let others do their traditional dance this year. I'm going to stay inside. I'm not going to bother. I don't think that God, goddess, whatever is going to do anything. And then, of course, they see you. Hey, why didn't you come? You should come. Why don't you come? What's wrong with you? Everybody picking on people who are different. Now, the third line, this is where we meet the material plane. So are they going to behave according to the traditional rules, regulations, ritual, and culture of the tribe, the elders of the tribe, or not? The 3 is the one who is always being watched, because martyrs tend to attract attention. If we go back to Gate 10, line 3, behavior that attracts attention. The third line, at the most mundane level, it's a risk to be yourself, to be different, to stand out, to be determined, to try new things, to adapt, to be resilient. The martyr game is that a 3 is always designed to be watched, in the sense of bumped into. And so if we think about the 6 for a moment, the first binary of the 6-line profile, where you have the first Saturn cycle, the 30 years, and then you have this climbing up to the roof phase between 30 and 50. That Saturn cycle in their first 30 years, is that trial and error process, and this long, slow climb to being on the roof is about being an observer. So instead of being down and dirty and making mistakes and failing forward or backward, whatever it happens to be, for the 6, when it moves into its roof phase, now it's about observer, not being observed. So it's something to understand about all third-line beings, that they are observed. We are observed. And that it's really hard for them to be invisible. I mean, yeah, I'll just leave it at that. My mind went into all of that. This is why, when I first heard this, not just now, but this is why I'm always called out, and I'm always, my mind says always, okay, not self-dramatize. Burned at the stake when I do those things that other people say I shouldn't, The anarchist, burn it down, tear it down, those things don't work. Okay. The 37 here in the family gate of friendship. Again, the manifestation, macro and microcosmically, of the organic nature of communities. Third line, we call it evenhandedness. This is learning about the success of any group. It is dependent on maintaining order. So Jupiter exalts the ability to judge what behavior is appropriate and react in a balanced manner to transgressions. In other words, the possibility to have the sensitivity to know what behavior is appropriate in a relationship. Mars detriments, an ironic tendency to either test incessantly the borders of acceptability or to respond to the very same tendency in others with severity. The possible lack of sensitivity to what behavior is appropriate. So to compress the keynotes, we see know what behavior is appropriate or lack of knowing of what behavior is appropriate. Yeah, in support of the tribe, sensitivity. This is part of the stream of sensitivity. the possible expression of the awareness, 37, of sensitivity to what behavior is correct or not. Well, third line, behave according to the elders or not. If it doesn't work, break the bond or not. This, I mean, as in the break the bond is the or not, as in break from the tradition. So in order to process this, we know it's emotional. So what happens if they don't behave according to the elders' tradition? What happens to them? They get martyred. And it's not very nice because now we have alienation, we get punished, and all of the things that go with it, shamed, blamed, and all that fun stuff. Fun stuff. Typical third line process. Now, do recall that if you are operating in alignment, none of this stuff is going to be incorrect. There is what it is. And even though you might feel temporarily the jolt of the separation or pain from the disintegration of the bond, because again, remember, we're looking at a bond here that is not clear because there is a tension point between the 37 and the 40. If it's the right thing to break the bond with and walk away from, what that means then, if it's right to come back together, the bond will be stronger for it. That's true across the board with any three business. That's bonds made and broken in order to find its resiliency and its adaptability in the tribal family in this context. So again, these lower trigram lines are basic conflicts with parents, okay? Respect or not the traditions of the elders, behave according to the elders or not. Oh, the 1-3 business, you know? Let's say it's a 3-generation family. The basic conflict with the grandparents, they still live within the home. Then the child, who is a parent, having difficulty with the grandparents, well, there is even another child of the parent down below. Which one do I follow? Mom, dad, grandma, grandpa? We have some difficulties down here with the 1, 2, 3, because it is the eldest of the authority figures that actually establishes the tradition. Because when we get into Pentaland, this is 3 to 5 people. So you've got 4 adults living in the home, you've got 1 child. The eldest of the grandparents is going to be the one that it gets the most deference or weight when it comes to who within the penta exalts as far as being in charge. So even if there are other people within the family context, when it comes to the penta itself, it will give weight to the eldest. You see that in family, you see that in business, which brings a whole nother can of worms to consider. Now, when we look at the upper trigram, 4, 5, and 6 here, influence, 4th line. 5th line is devotion. 6th line is the value of these tribal traditions. The change that we're dealing with here, again, remember, is that we're looking at transpersonal relationships, not just about me, myself, and I. That's 1, 2, 3 business. 3 business being, oops, there's somebody there and I'm banging around, potentially. Yeah, the 2 unaware, the 1st line investigating. So they're very different processes. We're not dealing with the same kind of personal dilemma that the 1, 2, 3 goes through, like as in, should I, can I, may I, please. No, this is a transpersonal process looking at the tribe around us, and we're looking out beyond our parents, and we're seeing the community of tribal tradition, this channel of community, a design of a part seeking a whole that is disintegrating as far as the tension point, as far as the weakening of that connectivity field. So it's really interesting to think about when it comes to the difference between lower and upper trigram. Lower trigram is very, very concerned about the praying for some outside intervention, in other words, God. When you come to the upper trigram, they're more trying to get others to be influenced or devoted to or find value in God. So it's not their own trip, it's about other. So calling out to God, praying to God. Ross says it's sort of like strength in numbers, where if you're sitting by yourself all alone, it's a tiny little frequency in the wilderness, But if we all band together as a tribe, 10 to 16 people, all activations turn on, light up. And these are the people who are looking to try and get everybody together. Let's come together in communion in our community. Let's have our feasts. Let's bond over food. Let's pray together. We'll all do this together. Strength in numbers. Something will happen, says the fourth line, for our friends, our familiars, our family to be able to achieve something, be supported by God, to find God. The fifth line, devotion to tribal tradition or not, the message of God, the messenger of God, putting out the call. The sixth line, oh, what an interesting one when we get there. The value of tribal traditions or not. Let's keep the traditions, but maybe we get rid of those people who don't really obey God in the same way as we do, More than that, this is the movement away from communal need, because now it's reaching to not just the other side, as the fourth and fifth line do. They're also reaching through the sixth line into the beyond, what is beyond. Sixth line is a transitional line. So in other words, when we're looking at 1, 2, and 3, they're basically going to pray for me, something personal. Please look after my health. Please look after my soul. Please look after my body. If you do this for me, then I will, whatever it is, I'll give my affection only to you, God, whatever God it is that they're praying to. On the other side, when you get to upper trigram, it's not personal at all. It's not, me, my stuff. It's, no, please bring blessings to my family, on our fields, on our crops. May our children outpower or be educated better than, it's more about the generations of the genetic lineage. Language is very different with 4, 5, and 6 because it's other based. 1, 2, and 3 is personally based. That isn't to say that these 4, 5, and 6s wouldn't like to be touched by God, of course. I mean, they're part of the tribe, so indirectly they would be. They're not directly interested in it, though. They're interested in carrying on tradition more than anything else as a way of maintaining the tribal pool, the loyalty, love, bargain, tradition. This is tradition-based here, tribal tradition. So when we know the nature of 4s, friendly, familiar, influential, opportunist, they're much more concerned about influencing the maintenance of the tribal tradition or not. They're going to get the community operating together, continuing the tribal rituals through those that it knows, the opportunism of being a part of the family. Because of its fear of tradition, it's going to want to influence accordingly to carry on tribal tradition or not. Having to hold traditional roles, that can be a very heavy burden to bear. What if this person is absolutely strongly individual, but this is part of, an activation in which we're just looking at analyzing the fourth line personality, not that arm of the cross. So they don't have this channel, but the personality is 4. So they resonate with this. So about the family, familiars, friends. That is, let's give God the opportunity to answer our prayers. Let's pray. Let us pray, and in getting everybody's hands and, bowing down the head. We can only do that by being steadfast. Think 4, 1, steadfast. The 4 is fixed in its nature. Steadfastly holding or upholding the letter of the tribal law here. We cannot judge how or when or why God may look down upon us and whether God will answer or not. We just have to have faith. We cannot, in our current nature, and in ancient days, they would degrade the body, shame the body. Oh, it's our lowliness. Oh, thou art so, above me. I could not ever understand the reasoning of God. Therefore, the point is not to suffer personally, but to continue the tradition here, because tradition is our way. God works in mysterious ways. I don't mean to be trite like that. I'm just changing my language a bit in order to show that I'm saying stuff that, commonly is in the vernacular of the tribe to see its reality from the outside. Yeah. So, of course, fourth lines, when they do this and get everybody together to pray, they're going to gain influence that way by communing in order to get everybody's prayers answered. Please bless the crops in the fields and the business or whatever it happens to be, so that we can maintain our own community, the traditions in our family. And it doesn't matter whether it's spiritual or not. Remember, this is the part of the channel of tribal spirituality. I keep doing air quotes because it's not really, to help us remember, it's not really tribal. It can be mundane. I mean, feeding one's stomach, feeding one's family. When you get to the 5, you have devotion to tribal tradition or not. Fifth lines can be rebellious, can't they? They can be heretics. They can be burned at the stake. They can be stoned in a hurry. Stoned as in put to death. Their reputation, not literally, but their reputation put to death. So devotion carries a very heavy connotation. I mean, to be truly, utterly devoted. It's a very, very powerful word. It doesn't just show up here, it shows up in other places too in the body graph. If we could to translate it in other words, we might say it's zealousness. Now, if you marry that to an undefined sacral center, then you have some serious overzealousness that doesn't know when enough is enough when it comes to devotion to the tribal tradition or not. Ross says that the potential of the 5th line here in the 37 is a very unusual line in this family, gate of friendship, the manifestation, macro and microcosmically, of the organic nature of communities. 5th line says love. We're learning in this life the natural and unaffected devotion to the family. Venus exalts natural harmony and perfected sharing. Natural harmony and sharing possible through friendship. Mars detriments emotional dependency that often turns love into hatred. The possibility of dependency turning love into hate. Hate's a very strong word. These people who are 5th line with their devotion to tribal principle of the traditional expression of family and friendship and bonding. This is somebody who can be seen as a heretic. The other person may lay positive expectations on that person to love them. They're seen by the other as somebody who may be devoted to upholding tradition, or on the flip side, that they hate the tradition that they are dumping on. If they're heretical, right? A heretic, the black heretic. When it comes to the challenging the status quo or the upsets in the communal constructs. Heretics are seen because it's a projection field. Initially, it's a positive projection field, but nonetheless, when the heretic isn't able to be delivering on the promise of the family with its affection and loyalty. Remember, it's in the emotional system. It's jacking itself up and down on the wave itself. It's chemistry. So it's not like you're going to always maintain that devotion. You can't. So then we have this full-on hatred, or someone who's full of hatred. One of the cliches of schisms is that these schisms are rooted in hatred, where devotion suddenly becomes rebellion, suddenly becomes hate. One person talking up the other person. Oh my God, it's so amazing, so amazing, so amazing. And then they get too close and the fifth line doesn't hold up the initial positive projection field because it can't. It's emotional. And then the person who loved, all of a sudden, it turns into hate and tearing down the other out of spite or otherwise. Being devoted to the tribe is a call that is designed to be made to the devotion of the tribal tradition by the five. And that zealousness that is here is the role of the fifth line in its tribal nature. You can see that the more zealous and the more devout one becomes, especially when it comes to family tradition of religion, because that's where all of this is rooted in, the more essential it is that something has got to happen, that's got to give. It has to. And if it doesn't happen, then there is this change that suddenly takes place, this movement away, this denial that suddenly emerges on the horizon. Where's the denial coming from? 40 on the other side. Because remember, the 4, 5, and 6, they're transpersonal. They're looking across the channel. They know what's over there on the other side, and they're very much aware of it. These, after all, 37s are awareness gates. So the possible awareness of who could deliver on the bargain through devotion to tribal tradition or not. Devotion is a two-way street. Of course, out of this is where all the heretics come. The heretic that goes on to being devoted to the tribal tradition, potentially even overturning it or wanting to overturn it or actually needing to overturn it. Why? Why would a 5 need to overturn the tribal traditions, the things that are broken, or the things that no longer have influence? Because 5s are the new way, the nascent trajectory, or the new heresy, the savior, the saint, the rescuer. My mind wanted to say fixer, but truly only when it comes to what actually it has the potential to put the call out for. Okay, the call overrunning or overturning tribal tradition. So devotion or not. Always remember there is always an or not in any of these, and it's not a bad thing. We finish with the tribal value in the 6th line, the value of tribal tradition or not. This is the role model line. The value of the tribal tradition within the context of family, with its fear of tradition. It's no longer a question of the readiness for God to look after the chosen. This is the pragmatic. The value of tradition maintains our communities. It keeps our language alive, and so forth and so on. And the tradition itself is more important than anything else to the 6. You recall how 6s can be observers. They can be seen as detached, unattached, aloof, on the roof. You know, they're not really a part of everything else. When we look at the line qualities 1 through 5, the differentiation of the hexagram, 6 moves beyond. It's looking all the way down the line of circuitry. So what ultimately is going to be of support in this context to the tribal community? That is what the 6 is looking for. So purpose in this family, gate of friendship, through the manifestation, macro and microcosmically, of the organic nature of communities. We're learning in this life the energy to maintain the family. The energy to maintain the family is enhanced by recognizing its values. Venus exalts the gift of not only recognizing the inner meaning of the family, but an appreciation for its values. In other words, the possibility of extending friendships through the appreciation of its value. Mercury detriments a need for diversity that may ignore the achievements of the family in favor of withdrawal. In other words, the need for diversity that, despite appreciation, will prefer casual friendships. Aloof. Standoffish. Some might say stuck up. In Hawaii, we say, hi, maka maka, their nose up in the air. So It's a social opportunity that would bring everybody together. And the sixth line can recognize the value of that tribal tradition. And it will uphold those traditions, or maybe not. So the value to the community of self itself, ultimately in full support of the tribal traditions being upheld. It isn't particularly religious or fixated on God here, though, or God outside of you, anybody's ability to answer, or the potential of whether or not one could be blessed, touched by God. It's simply about the value of tradition here, no longer concerned about God. It's about, is this valuable? Does this have purpose for the community? This meaning whatever the activity within the communal construct or the person, the value of that tribal tradition. Because all of these lines are emotional, we know then that they resonate to no truth in the now. No truth in the now. That patience brings its rewards with any of these lines, that they have to go through the up and down to find the middle ground. And as we look across the way to the 40th gate, the gate of deliverance, the path of denial, we're now looking that we have this double differentiation in that path that operates at the 40, because we still have that 1, 2, and 3, 4, 5, and 6, this trigram duality that we have here. We have the inner process, 1, 2, 3. We have the outer process, 4, 5, 6. If we look at the lower trigram, we look at the word struggle here, because struggle is about relationships to the elders. Struggle. So this is the bridge that we almost cross in the 1, 2, and 3. Line qualities, you're going to resonate with struggle. So link struggle personally, 1, 2, and 3. Struggle personally, 1, 2, and 3. When we look at the upper trigram, we're now looking at the transpersonal process of gate 40, where we see the word liberation, and we're dealing with the tribe. It's liberation from the influence, demands, or elders. We'll go through these one at a time. Let's start with the 1. So we've seen then that we have this dualistic binary between the line qualities of the lower and upper trigram, in that there's struggle on the lower and liberation in the upper. So we're dealing within the tribe. Struggle at the foundation with this gate 40, gate of deliverance, the path of denial, brings struggling with the rules of the elders, or not. Remember all these or nots, because everything again is a binary, this and that, just like up and down, black and white, yin and yang. There's always this duality inherent within the construct of our genetic matrix. You can have a 4037 that is very clearly in the God game, and you can have a 4037 that is definitely not. There's always this binary. And here in the first line, we've got the struggle with the rules of the elders. So remember that the 40th gate is here to be recognized for work, to deliver on the promise of what it means to be living in community in the tribal context. 37s are very good at sitting in the church, but the 40 is the one that has to build the thing, build the church, build the schools, build the institutions, build the company. In business, the 40 is the foreman, the person who delivers on the product or the service. So at least they have to make enough money to be able to pay for the building of the church or the school or the company or whatever. It's in it for the love of work, and work in our context clearly means that they have to get something in return. That's the bargain speaking there. So it's a very different quality that's being asked of the 40. The 40 is being asked to dedicate its willpower and the will to provide for those who need, Is it going to be correct for this person to provide for the needy, or are they going to be stingy? Remember, it can go both ways. The whole thing for the 40, the whole story is earning love, and will their will be dedicated to the other? Because this is now struggle with the rules of the elders or not. Are those rules going to give it what it needs, which is on the other side, part of the bargain? Affection, loyalty, love, community, earning its approval from the family on the other side. When we look at the first line, this is the gate of denial. Remember, deliverance, a gate of aloneness. It says, why should I? Why should I follow these stupid rules just because you said I should? I'm an ego. I have a big, fat, healthy ego. Or not. Why should I? So struggle with the rules of the elders or not. The struggle is to protect their ego from the work that it has to do. If it's not going to get its loyalty, its ability to have affection from the other, its just reward, so it can take its well-deserved rest, why would it do that? Think about the stomach here. The stomach has to digest and rest, digest and rest. It works to digest and then it rests. So there's this requirement or need that it has its just rewards. I can remember Ra talking about, if you ever look into how he talks about his 40th gate, he called himself the workhorse, I'm the workhorse of the family. He earns his keep, that kind of thing. It has to work with the rules of the elders when it's a first line here. And the moment that 40 makes the deal with the 37 on the other side, because that's who it's talking to, it has to work. That is part of the bargain. The 40 has to work. And that means it has to work in the first line context within the structure or rules or framework of the elders in order to support them on all the things that go with it. It's like the first commandment. Honor thy mother and thy father. That's the first lines. Or not. That's its business. So a 40 can be hesitant here because it's very easy for 40s to get conditioned by 37s on the other side. Ross says that only the emotional system can get the ego to go to work, get to work. Only the 37 can do that. It is their gift. They can focus the will of the ego. And if we go back to remembering our foundation of hexagram study, we know that the 40 is a love gate. It's a personal love gate. It's the love of work. It's a love of earning love through work, earning the right to be loved. That's give and take of the bargain. So it's a very conditional kind of love, isn't it? If you remember someone with the whole channel, remember they're always going to have the same exact line on the other side. You really have to look at the whole channel if they have Sun, Earth, or nodes in this context, because it's going to be exactly polar opposite, same line, color, tone, and base, either nodally, so the environmental frequency or direction of the perspective, or it's going to be their personality awareness or their unconscious nature. When we do this, when it comes to putting the two sets of keynotes side by side to look at the relationships that operate between them, if you're 4037, most of them do have the same lines. It's true, because it's opposition, quite easy, quite common to have oppositions in the wheel for definition to occur. You look at the binary theme between the two. It's important to see what the binary theme is in that connection. Now, if we think about it, oppositions in the wheel are exactly opposite of each other, aren't they? So it's quite interesting then to consider the fact that when we've got exact opposites in the wheel, you've got exact line oppositions too. So if we look at the 37th gate and the first line, respect the tradition of the elders or not, while also struggling with the rules of the elders or not. Follow the tradition of the elders or not, second line. struggle with the social demands of the elders or not, behave according to the elders' tradition or not, struggle with the attention of the elders or not. So, third lines, you can see we're going to go into all of the other 40th gate line qualities. You see the polarity, the challenge inherent in having these two great arms of that cross that they bear, or in the nodal environment. My mind said, it's not fair, but it is, part of the nature of what it is to be human. So what are we dealing with here? It is what it is. And it is opposite as far as what is going on there. So no wonder there's this tension point between the two, a tension point in the dynamic and the relationship of self with self, because I want to focus on the 1, 2, 3 business here still, because we're still within it. Let's go into the 2. The second line, struggle with the social demands of the elders or not. The social demands are a real struggle for it too. And the moment that you engage in the work, you have to leave your aloneness. You have to support others in the community because it's the call. Second lines on this path of deliverance, gate of deliverance, path of denial, are here to be called out to struggle with the demands of the elders or not. And 2s are waiting to deny. They just would prefer to be alone, because aloneness is something special for a gate 40. It is a gate of aloneness. 2s don't want to be bothered. They're hermits. So there's a dynamic here where the 2 is waiting for the call, and it is here to be called out, and it's here to struggle with the social demands of the elders. And that's its difficulty. It's very difficult for hermits to deal with people. No matter how much experience brings you, specifically if this is somebody's profile, to understand what that means is that the pressure of the social domain, how uncomfortable a second line being can be when it's called to the wrong thing, wrong community, wrong people. Ooh, you add on other frequencies like the fact that maybe they are a projector and social awkwardness, personality-wise, just like, no, not those people. It can be a real struggle. The second line, let's say, responds to if they're generative, here to be able to recognize and be recognized for if it's projected, and so forth and so on. You're looking at the pressure to commit itself to the social demands of others within the community and the tribal structure. So we're dealing with the pressure of the elders on the second line. You commit, you're a natural, do this, So you've got to go to work if you're going to be a 40 and you're called. You're going to go to work within the church group. You have to help build this or guide this or advise on this. You got to do the job in order to create the money, in order to donate for this, in order to support this, whatever this is. You've got to help these people. This is your job. You're here for us. Do the work. And what if it's not correct? What if they succumb to the pressure of not being their own authority? Can be a real bitch, huh? If they're not clear in committing their energy. More than that, the 40 is only going to give up its aloneness if it's guaranteed the support of the other, okay? This stream circuit theme is sensitivity, and it's the drive to need support. It needs support in return for its support. That's what the 40th gate is looking for. Not support in the sense of financial support, because it's not about that. Here, it's the pleasure of its need for affection being met, for loyalty, for bonding, for caring, for food, for family, for friendship, all those things that it needs. And then everything about the 40th gate says, fine, all right, I will, right? It says, I will provide this. I will dedicate my will to this, my work to this, but you got to give me affection and loyalty and pleasure and touch and needs for bonding in return. Whatever that pleasure happens to be, it doesn't have to be sexual. Please understand that this is need for support, and it does link to touch, But as an example, if somebody is a friend, you let them in closer and you're more likely to bond over food, to shake hands, to hug, to hold, to kiss, to love, whatever. It has to do with the feel-good system in the body, the pleasure principle of being hugged. It has to do with something very, very profound to 40s. And that happens to be loyalty. You are disloyal to a 40. And boy, they will not look resentment, yeah, in the bitterness, the extreme bitterness of energy connection. These are two energy functions as far as the emotional energy and the willpower energy. So there's a lot of challenge here when one is not obeyed or when one is betrayed. When one is not obeyed or when one is betrayed, there is a lot of bad blood, you could say. People who don't ever forgive, who hold a grudge, as an example. Loyalty, if you're a 40-37, loyalty is always assumed, but it doesn't necessarily come to be. If you're a 40 or a 37, loyalty is something that you cannot trust, or maybe you don't trust, you just can't trust because it's not inherently built in within the genetic framework. Yeah. When it comes to the dedication of your will as a 40 by itself, it's looking for something in return that it does not have. And if it doesn't sense or see or feel that touch of it being there, it's not going to give it. So what'll it do? Deny. Deny. Yeah, not going to do it for you. My will is not there for you. I will not provide for you. I will or will not provide for the needy, says the 40. Gate 40, Gate of Deliverance, and the path of denial at the third line level, this is the material plane business. So here we have this struggle with the attention of the elders or not. Because in this Gate of Deliverance on the path of denial goes back to this third line theme here of understanding that the third line is seen, it's observed, it's on this material plane business. And isn't it funny when we see people messing up? Like, don't we have a lot of those videos out there where people, fall downstairs or they really like ski jump mishaps or whatever it is that it's usually that they put a laugh track on it when you're watching people hurting themselves. Now, this is on the pain point of doing it in a tribe. So everybody sees the three make the mistakes, fall down, and this is the thing that everybody, the elders, are attuned to. Oh, how are you doing? Oh, did you mess up again? It's one of the things that is done that they are seen when they screw up or fuck up. They're observed. We are observed as threes. So humility is good for a third line, particularly here for a 40, for a defined ego being. Humility is one of those things for the third line that can really help. In this deliverance, the gate of aloneness, again, the point of transition between struggle and liberation. A calculated mode in deliverance to avoid attracting the attention of negative forces. Pluto exalts. The subtlety to enjoy deliverance without having to flaunt it. The capacity of the ego to avoid negative forces, even if it means being alone. Third line business, break the bond. Mars detriments, the ego, arrogance that demands attention and gets it. The capacity of the ego to demand attention. And so this struggle with the attention of the elders, one of the deepest martyr themes, humility or not. Oh, they want to put this burden on my back. Why do I have to do this? Why do I have to work? I have to struggle with this attention and I don't want that attention. So run away. This is the break the bond, run away, not just walk away, run away from the tribe line. The 40.3 in the third line business, they want to get the hell out of the tribe as quickly as possible because they don't want to be watched. They don't want to be seen. They don't want to be criticized. Oh, you did it wrong again and all that business. So third line, break the bond with what does not work. If the bargain isn't good as a bargain, if it isn't a good bargain, the attention is just going to lead to difficulties. So this struggle with the attention of the elders or not, you can see how this works now. It has a problem here, difficulties because the bargain is not fair. And there's constantly going to be this blame business, the ramification of emotional explosions, all of the things that can occur when the bargain is not fair, or the bargain, do beware, is going to break. So when it comes to a good deal, if it's a good deal, then the attention can be something quite positive because the pleasure is going to be there for the will. Remember, the will is seeking, the ego is seeking the pleasure of support. If the support is there from the elders, oh God, that feels great. You know, it can feel good because the emotional need-based pleasure principle, my tribe loves me because I deliver. And then I get the attention. I deliver on the bargain, and then I get my rewards. I get my rest, I get my money, I get my affection, I get my stomach fed. Everybody says I'm great. All right, I discovered something. You know, and this is one of the traps of a third line being in a process of trial and error, because that's always the name of the game. When we have a mistake and we finally get this positive reinforcement of intention, because that's what attention is. It's a positive reinforcement of, oh, we like this. This was good. You keep doing this. What can happen is we get carried away as threes. Instead of dedicating 2 hours a day in service to the tradition of the elders that they dedicate, maybe 4 or more, non-energy type, no, knowing when enough is enough, the sacral energy, overwhelmment and domination of not living in accordance with one's truth, then we have the challenge of not having enough rest, because remember, ego beings have to earn their rest too. And what if they just don't know when to stop and they just keep on keeping on, breaking down physically, sometimes mentally, but oftentimes non-energy type, it's physically. So Ra wants us to remember that on this path, here we have denial, on the stream of the mystical ways awakening, that tribal spirituality can go nowhere without the commitment of the 40th gate of deliverance, and its willpower. It has to have it. The essential piece of business is here. This is absolutely necessary and critical. All of it is. But this is the point between the struggle, the tension point between struggle and liberation. It's here. It's truly here. And the other thing is that the 40th gate operates in a transition field through the circuitry because of the way the mystical circuitry actually functions in the spiritual process. Because you can see here, normally what happens here is the natural route would be to the 21st gate and out through the 45. The tribal material plane, the money game, channel of materialism. Yeah, channel of materialism, channel of money, a design of a materialist. But not here in this spiritual process, in that forking of the paths. It doesn't go there. It goes over to the 51. And the 40 has an unusual hidden channel underneath pathway, if you could say, inside the center that moves from the 40 to the 51, not just from the 40 to the 21. So you see elders down here with the third line, personal process, one's elders. Tribal up here with the 1, 2, 3, sorry, elders, not third line, just all of the 1, 2, 3 lower trigram. Tribal up here with 4, 5, and 6. Because the 40th gate has this binary, this very deep, profound binary between lower struggle and upper liberation, the trigrams, changing from not just personal to transpersonal as all hexagrams do, but it's the elders of the tribe into the tribal law or nature, or not Not we're going over, leaping out of the tribe and into the void, into the higher self, into the realms of higher principles, abandoning the lower principles that saw only us versus them. Indeed, we see here everyone is deserving of love because of the one awareness of I am coming to the fore. Now, this is the lower trigram pointing at the 2145. So this is the path that they tend to take. So then in the example, you take the personality, even if they don't have the gate 40, take the personality or the design, see what line, and then know that this is the tendency. Okay, if they don't have a gate 40 planetary activation that you can read, that would be, maybe it's what causes them to hold their breath or exhale or inhale or have some kind of voice or vocal quality. That's just a serendipity of their specificity, meaning their nuances and subtleties are there. Okay, that's a part of the nature of wherever it came from. Let's just think magic square. But if they have nothing there, they still have that gate, that tendency. Lower trigram, personality, is going to go over to money. Upper trigram is going to go over to the individuality. Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Lower trigram has a pointing that is less to the 51 and more over to the 45. Okay? But what if they do have this locked in, this fixedness? That fixedness in response or with awareness or however that being happens to behave, that's what's going to take them there. So do recall that there are a lot of specificities. Yeah? Each uniqueness is going to operate correctly so long as they're operating in alignment with their strategy, honoring themselves as the authority. So when you get to the upper trigram, this liberation, we're looking now at liberation themes that are going to pull it over into the individual mystical process, out of the tribe into the realms of the higher self. In order to do that, you have to leave the tribal laws, rules, structures, obeyances behind. You have to. So at some point, remember, all of us are on this journey of awakening. Are we going to take it? Are we going to leave behind the tribal laws, or are we going to go into our money trip, lower trigram, individual trip, upper trigram, which seems kind of challenging, doesn't it? As far as, remember, the 4, 5, and 6, usually it's about others. What about the others? We don't want to leave them behind. But remember that this is denial. This is the gate of deliverance. So you have to leave the traditions of your elders. You must if you want to awaken. You have to go your own way, do your own thing. When you look at any mature religions out there, there are tons of different factions. It's how you know human design has taken some maturity. It's gone through its Saturn cycle, obviously. And so now we have all these different ways. Everybody's doing their own thing, going their own way. As an example, how many different Christian churches are out there? All kinds of variations because they go to their higher self and they find their own way forward. There are many paths, and you can liberate yourself from the tribal tradition without totally leaving the faith. You can still take on this aspect of this or that, or you can just completely leave the faith behind. You can shift into a totally new way of being. All of that is possible with liberation, as far as the gate 40, gate of denial, gate of deliverance. And the reason for that, because when you're looking at the upper trigram, you know something about upper trigrams, remember, across the channel, not just across the channel, but all the way down the line of circuitry. And in this context, because we're dealing with the stream of awakening, not only is the 40 looking across, to the 37, 1, 2, and 3, it's doing its own thing. But 4, 5, and 6, it's looking back that way, as well as turning around and looking beyond in the other direction. One of the interesting dynamics that is here, where the 1 through 3 is going to be impacted we're still talking about gate 40. Lines 1 through 3 are going to be impacted by the 37. What happens when we get up here, 4, 2, 4, 5, and 6 knows that it's there, as in the 37, the family, the friends, the familiars, the people who give the affection in terms of the bargain. But the 40, think like Janus, it has two faces. It can look in both ways. So which way do I go? Do I stay with the family, with tradition, and accept, even though it's not fulfilling for me, is the way of our community how it's always been? Is it something for me? Or is it there's something else beyond? What lies within the great beyond? This not just mystical itself, it's a bridge that carries the possibility of deliverance from the struggle, liberations from the influence, demands, or the expectations from the elders. But what would we call, the wisdom keepers? That's a good word. Yeah, don't we call them wisdom keepers? Yeah, the rulers, the observers, the ones who stand as role models. Liberation from the elders are wisdom keepers. Well, this is the way it has always been. How do we move beyond? How do we get beyond? Ross says that this is a wonderful, wonderful word, deliverance, to be delivered out of the hands of the tribe and into whatever, God, whatever you want to call it, to go through initiation, to awaken existentially as oneself, and to the reality of the great I am, one's existence. However you want to look at this journey, when we go to the upper trigram, the 40 becomes something that is very unique in the way that it operates, because 40 has a special quality. Again, think like Janus. It looks both ways at the 4th, 5th, and 6th line quality. The mundane level, it goes up into the tribe because it can look not only in different directions, it can go back and it can look forward in two ways. Is it going to be turned to the face of the tribe and continuing on that path of hierarchy into owning and having and money and rulership? Well, it depends on their design, right? Ordinary design analysis takes you up into the 21 because it rhymes, circuitry 2145 with ego or tribal unity, you could say. It's automatically designed to go to the 21, says 40. Of course, I'd go up to money. I have to provide for my family. At the most mundane level of our process, that's precisely what it would do. And yet, the choice point or the shattering experience can be a turning point for 40 that has the capacity to ignore the traditions, turn its back on the family, and instead of going up into security of more money, take a risk and leap out of the tribe and into the void. You saw that in Ra, where he abandoned his family. He just left. He didn't tell anybody where he was going. He just disappeared. Yeah, he went off on his own in that initiation phase of his life, that turning point suddenly, where shockingly, it's a shock to turn the back on one's family. Yeah, to want to leave a legacy that is immortalized. And it's very different than just money. It's not fortune. It may be fame, though. Remember how the 40 is deeply connected to food, and these traditions being connected to ritualistic imbibing of food, bonding over food. The mouth, 37, the stomach, 40. So it's common for beings who enter into this pathway to suddenly fast rather than feast. Okay? Fast to empty the stomach of its tribal contents and to go into the purging in order to emerge. So where there's this mystical jump into a different circuitry that moves beyond the 40, away from the 21. We're turning our backs on the tribe. We're leaping. We're taking the leap of faith. It's a shock. And so these people tend to go into fasting. If you've ever taken any psychedelic drugs, you know the last thing you want to do is eat. This is a shaman channel here. And those shamans, boy, do they imbibe those substances in order to find that different way, that different path. No food here. Get it all out. Clean it out. You know, the purge. If you've ever taken ayahuasca, it's just you are purging on both ends. Scrape it out of the intestines. Just get rid of it all. Get rid of all that family, familiar, food-based ritual communion. You have to purge in order to emerge. Most of the ways in which we operate mystically and spiritually, Ross says, are just formulas. This is just one of those formulas along the path of awakening, where we see the cleaning out of the 4037, the bridge of food and family, to break that connection with the mystical channel of the true mystical channel of the tribe, where we have this mystical channel of the individual. That's the true initiation into the mysteries of life with this 5125, initiation and design of needing to be first. And so then here we have the bridge. When this bridge is down, now we have broken our connection with the old gods, the old ways, the heaviness that goes with it. All of that disappears. So when we're looking at the upper trigram here, and we're looking at the word liberation, Ra calls this a gorgeous word in this particular place, liberation. The 40, 4, 5, and 6, fourth, fifth, and sixth lines. Because, remember, there's a weakness inherent in the bridge, a weak quantum. Remember, a channel is a quantum of two gates. There's the tension point, the bridge point. So he says, as this is an opposition in the wheel, commonality for people to have this as far as beings. Yeah, lots of people have this. So channels are basically a quantum, the whole that is greater than the sum of the parts. And so these two gates become more than just their line qualities. Do recall that when you're analyzing someone's chart, because you're going to get a lot of these people. Ra would call this as a low quantum, or maybe even a weak quantum might be the best description, because of that 40th gate, because of its dualistic construct, the binary of looking back and over to tribe or beyond into the great beyond, and having struggle at the foundational level, and then liberation at the upper trigram, the transpersonal level. So even if you're your own 4037, you have the whole channel, your 40 could still turn its back on its children, on your own, and look over to the 51. Have you ever heard those stories about people leaving their families? Back in the day, I don't know particular names, but there's lots of stories of people just leaving family and going off on their own. This is the way here that's breaking down that bargain that is no longer clear. So holding on to tradition is the 37. And that, because there's a weak quantum here, this as a whole, these people, how many billions of people have this channel? It represents an incredible dilemma in their lives now, even here to this day, because the bargain is breaking down. Because part of them, the emotional part, wants to hold on to their family or tradition to be the good, whatever it is, even though they might be on the low end of their wave in relationship to it. There's still something that holds them to their tradition, holds them to family, holds them to unity. You know, seeing, let's say, divorce as a failure, as an example. When we look to the 40 and we look away from tradition, instead of the tribe, we look towards the 51. Now, the ego in them as a 40, this 40 deliverance business, has turned its back on the arrangement or the bargain, the guarantee, and now is looking away from that bargain, what was supposed to be fair and balanced. It's not, you know, it's breaking down. over to the 51, the shock of initiation, looking for their liberation. There's the 40, fourth line, fifth and sixth lines. Remember again, whether they have it in their design or whether it's fourth, fifth, and sixth lines in their personality or design construct. Conversely, 37s are back here praying, waiting for their traditional God to speak to them, to answer their prayers. These beings, they carry both when they have the full channel. And the solution for them is when either one side or the other wins. Ross says he hates to put it that way, but it's really true. One side or the other. Which is it? Is it going to be the personal liberation of the passenger? Is it going to be the body, which is the life? Which is it? The clarity that can come without nervousness, with resolution, with confidence, has to come from alignment, correct operation through that process. Remember, there's no morality here. One side of them waiting for the prayers to be answered, for God to speak to them. The other side looking for the liberation. If God speaks to them before they're liberated, they're going to turn their back on liberation and they're going to re-embrace the tradition with their will. If, on the other hand, the liberation leads them to a place that is empowering and fulfilling for them, that awakens them to their individual truth, higher principles, then that will be their new bargain. And in a sense, they will forever consciously turn their back on their 37, their family. Might be their own, might be another, but they'll turn their back and you never get rid of it, says Ra. These are the beings that have deathbed conversions and all kinds of things that happen because their 37 will never get up waiting for the traditional God to speak to them, never completely give up on the hope, the dream, the faith that they might be eventually touched by God. Now that's thinking of the God, traditional gods that are outside of you that you pray to. Look up here, individual, the nature of being you. That is about your own sovereign truth. Remember, this channel is looking for truth. What is truth? Truth is individual. If I were to write a book, I'd like to call it that. Truth is individual. May not be a catchy title, but that would be the premise of the book. 4037, again, mystical, not really. It requires some kind of event to open up its possibility of turning one's back on tradition. So let's say you've got a parent whose child has died. Nothing like death to turn one's back on, family. Maybe they're just a single parent and then no more family. I'm never getting married again. I'm going to devote myself to God, going to find my individual awakening. Ra wants it to be really understood that it does not mean that 4037s and the 40 in the 4037 do not have this capacity and are locked to the demands of the 37. Quite frankly, it's just simply not so. But again, it takes the event to trigger these things. Maybe you got fired. It doesn't have to be mystical. It can be tragedy, all kinds of things. Sometimes something happens in the life and suddenly opens up this possibility of turning one's back here on the fears of holding a traditional roles. Can we be liberated? We remember that the point of human design is to liberate the passenger from choice in order to see clearly. So rather than caught up in morality, good people do this, I'm right if I do that, right, wrong, should, would, have to, must, all of that stuff that is indoctrinated in us through our media, through our, upbringing, our schooling, all that we can let go of, or can we? It depends. What's your reality? That holding on to tradition and looking for liberation and the break in the dedication to one's family, all of this comes with an enormous price because there's going to be a huge conflict within someone. The big price within oneself is that there's always this challenge, this struggle, this fight until one side wins. And the moment that one side wins, then there isn't the same kind of dilemma. Ross says there's no more dilemma. Can you imagine? For most beings who carry this channel being caught both ways, one's, let's say, their conscious awareness, one is what's grounding. Because the channel has a weak quantum, those two linger as kind of separate qualities that won't merge completely into the quantum of the channel. So that there's this tension point, this duality, this conflict inherent within. Now, as we go to the upper trigram, we have the fourth line, which says liberation from the influence of the tribe or not. So we have the fourth line, liberation of the influence through the gate 40, path of denial. And we have the fourth line, influence, the maintaining of tribal tradition through the gate of the family, the sphere of tradition. See the dynamic there? Liberation from the influence, fourth line, denial, gate, 40th gate, fourth line, denial. And the fourth line, influence, the maintenance of the tribal tradition. And that's very interesting. There you see the exact opposite polarity through the line quality even, where the 3740 will influence the tribe to maintain its traditions. Yet the 40, the fourth line, there's a part of it that would love to be liberated from that influence. So there's the inherent polarity or the challenge within. My God. This is, which side are you going to be pulled to? It depends on the nature of you. Are you going to be refocused on the 37, which is the natural perspective of the 40, naturally? Or are you going to turn your back, turning into the wind? Suddenly you're facing the possibilities of true liberation. Are you going to leap out of the tribe and into the void? Maybe. Ross says the other thing that in seeing the keynote of liberation in these upper lines, it's important to understand the upper lines of the 40 always feel, in one way or another, oppressed by their obligations, by the influence of the tribe on their life, the expectations. So as an example, you've got a young one growing up and she's told, no, you cannot marry this one. No, they don't make enough money. Or no, you cannot do that. You cannot go to that school. They don't believe the same things as we. It's not correct to do this. It's not correct to do that. So the challenge here, they're looking for liberation from the influence, liberation from the demands, fifth line, liberation from the elders, wisdom keepers, sixth line. When we look at the 5, this is the demands of the tribe that they're wanting deliverance from in this path of denial. Denying the family, denying the fear of tradition or holding traditional roles. So in the 5th line, friendship, family, loyalty, bonding, trust, this 37th gate, we have the devotion to the tribal tradition or not. And think about this devotee, this total devotion to the tradition and the dream of being part of a family. Remember the channel name? A design of finding one's place, seeking and finding one's place within the context of the greater whole. So on the other end, 40 says, shit, that's a lot of work to be devoted. I want to be liberated from the demands of the tribe. That's a real burden. Why should I be burdened in that way? I don't want to super slave away. You know, there's all that underneath. What if the bargain isn't fair? Or what if they're bitter? You know, they're not correct in one's bonds. It doesn't mean like the or not is always coming to an end, but in most cases, the or not is actually first here with the gate 40, line 5. So I hope that that is clear. I'm going to say it again in a different way. Normally, what happens is we do it or not. You know, the or not is like an afterthought. If we were to change the slide here, we put the no liberation from the demands of the tribe. That comes first because you're like stuck in it. Oh, I've got a super slave. I got married, you know, love, honor, and obey and all this business. And I got to take care of my children. They're little. What are they going to do? Got to make sure I work hard, work for the family, feed the family. My dad was one of these as far as the full channel. So when you look at that full channel, they have to experience this, I'm not liberated from the demands. And then on the flip side, liberation from the demands. Divorce usually ends the game, where they get joint custody or not, and they don't have the same kind of commitments. When we're dealing with the not self world, we're dealing with the power of the mental game of people laying blame, whether on self or others. So under the 37th gate influence, it's very, very difficult for a 40 to find their liberation, because the 37, its emotional blame game trip can be very sticky. Remember, blood is thicker than water, very graspy, holding them like flypaper. It doesn't mean that it isn't there under their skin, Ra says, that they don't feel the demands of the tribe, this gate 40, line 5. This is a projection, though. Remember that fifth lines get projected upon. So if the tribe projects onto you that you're not as devout as you should be, oh boy, are you ever in trouble. The things that you will have to do to make up for it so that you can maintain your legitimacy, your respect within the community, your reputation of what it is that you can deliver on, these are the ones that so easily will, if the moment is there, turn their back on the tribe and seek liberation from those demands, from the projection field of the others. I'm out of here. See ya, says the 5. And when we get to the 6th line, Ra loved this one. This is liberation from the elders of the tribe, or not. He says it's so interesting. If we go and compare it with the 37th gate of the family, fear of tradition, in the 6th line, the value of tribal tradition or not. This 37-6 doesn't really care about the reward system of getting something back from God for your devotion. It just sees the value of tradition and being able to maintain the tribe and the community. And in many ways, this is about maintaining power. Okay, power. Think power here. Particularly when you're looking at the history of tribes that had to defend themselves against other tribes. There was solidarity, there was loyalty. It was enormously important in our tribal development because we had to either outnumber or outsmart or outbuild or outsucceed other tribes because it threatened our continuity, our ability to continue on, to strengthen and grow. Because remember, the 6th line is looking beyond, it's looking at the whole line of circuitry, what's ultimately going to be of support. So they value the tribal tradition more than people. Ooh, that can seem quite cold. Look at the 6th line of the gate of deliverance, the gate of aloneness, and this decapitation. Remember, this is the point of transition between struggle, lower trigram, and liberation, upper trigram. This is upper trigram. So the 6th line, liberation from the elders of the tribe or not. We're learning about here the necessary destruction of inferior forces in positions of power before liberation can take place. Sun exalts the authority, coupled with the magnanimity to remove from power only those which deserve such drastic treatment. The power and authority of the ego to eject individuals in legitimate defense of the group. You see the sun exalting and the earth detrimenting. That means then these people with gate 40 in their incarnation cross are going to absolutely have the juxtaposition always and in all ways. Earth detrimenting reads, exemplified by the terror of the French Revolution, where the idea of who was deserving of punishment was cruelly extended to an entire class. In other words, the distortion of the ego through power and authority. This is liberation from the elders of the tribe. So it can show up like killing the priests and replacing them with other priests. It can be quite savage in the way that it operates, decapitation. In other words, let's kill people, but we'll keep the tradition. The part of the Catholic Church in its history, basically what it did, that's something there in the 6. I'm sure there's other religions. It's just that Ra didn't mention that. I imagine Darshana would know. She studied religious studies in college. The other side of that is something deeply profound and mystical. Look at this sentence here, or fragment, I guess, statement. Liberation from God itself. At the deepest and most profound level, this 40th gate of deliverance, the path of denial, is liberation from needing God. Why? Because thou art God. God's authority, the authority that's been embodied within the elders and the tribal rulers and the way of the tribe and the God of, killing beings. This is now, instead of killing beings, it's killing God. It's getting rid of God. You don't need God. Thou art God. The sixth line, if you look at all 6 lines, remember they resonate with wisdom, but it takes a long time, a long year, 50 years, decades, 5 decades, 50 years to get there to this maturity level. If we look at it just from the philosophical approach to understand the nature of what it is to be a role model, role models can only be correct on their own authority. So that means then they cannot follow the tradition of the elders, even if it harmonizes, with what they want. They have to be their own authority. They cannot follow the authority of what the tribes say so is. They can't. They have to separate. Remember, this was the pressure to separate when we looked at the gate 19? Pressure to separate. They still cannot accept the authority of the elders or the authority of the tribe or even the authority of God. They have to be correct in their own authority. Now, think about this as far as where we're going into the new era, the new age. Everybody being conditioned to that resonance of the 6th line. Be a correct role model of one's own authority. And you do that mechanically. Happily for us, we know what to do in order to find our self that is true. This is the magic, the liberation from this mystical, spiritual trap that is a part of what it is to be Homo sapiens in transitus. The mutation in this time that we're in, it's really what it's all about as far as the 6th line representing this deep liberation, the separation from that spiritualizing. You see that in the world around us, how many religions there are, just completely explosion of many different mystical ways and paths. So you're liberated from the game when you're aware that you are beyond compare, that the darkness and the light, they are one and the same. You can fill the darkness with light, and all of a sudden, all is light, and there is no God. But this is the way things truly work when you see the patterns at play, when you watch it, the mechanism that is there. This is not about God, because you are God. Thou art God. Liberation from the elders of the tribe or not is something that's deeply profound, because this is where we find our liberation out of the tribe and into individual higher knowing of selfhood, higher self. Not everybody is going to turn that way. Not everybody can. They might have the material way at play and what to do. It is what it is. But for a 6 on its mystical journey, the 40 will turn its head to the 51 eventually. It may be a shock or may take some time. But part of this 40th gate in the 6th line has a need to kill God. Now that sounds quite heretical. Raw oftentimes would be shocking. To preface it or to explain it, I would like to say killing the concept of an external God, not blaspheming. Ra was not a believer, so he couldn't blaspheme. Mechanically, he was a mechanic of human design, the mechanism of choicelessness, and that we are programmed to be either broadcasting or to receive this as part of the mystical journey. So interesting to think about, hey? This channel of tribal spirituality. When we start within this process of understanding all of these things from the context of religion, here in the 3740 is the ultimate search for God. That's where it's nurtured. That's where it's birthed, as far as the support, the growth, the feeding of that touch for God, that prayer to find God, not just then eventually liberation from tradition, but liberation from having to seek outside of oneself for truth, not having to go and ask mom or dad or auntie or uncle or sister or brother or cousin or teacher for, what do you think? What should I do? No, coming back to the truth inherent inside. Ross says the irony, of course, is that there is truth for each of us. There is a truth. In that living correctly as ourselves and honoring our strategy and authority, we are truth. And ultimately, our spiritual destiny is to be truth, to be one with truth. I hope you enjoyed that.